Hello everybody and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. But James, my friend, we're going to have to think of a name for this, like Planet FE 2020L?
Planet FPL do the Euros?
Yeah, but then FPL is Fantasy Premier League, so there's no Premier League about it.
Planet Euro Fantasy?
Whatever you want to call it.
But I don't want to call it Planet Euro Fantasy because I feel like a lot of it's going to be, do that today. And we'll just talk more about the games and stuff over the next month or so.
Well, look, this is the start of some Euro 2020 content coverage and just a bit of fun and games, really. We are just taking a light-hearted approach to the Euros.
Until England kick off. Then nothing becomes light-hearted anymore.
This game is just for a bit of fun, isn't it, really? Although, I think the first thing to say out of the gate is I like the rules of this game. I think it's designed well to keep people engaged all the way to the end. So as much as I'm quite a meh international football kind of fan, I'm not really that excited by international football tournaments, but I do like the look of the game, and I do think the game will help my enjoyment of the Euros, to be honest with you.
As England fans, we're ignorant, aren't we? We actually only give a shit about the tournaments. We don't care about qualifying unless we're in the shit.
Yeah,
it's like 2 years with sod international football. But when the tournament comes round, you forget about it, right?
Your
club's not playing for 2 months, etc.
Yeah, and I think it's the first tournament maybe that my kids might get into. Necessarily, that always has an impact. I remember being 10 with Italia 90. And that was the first tournament that I remember with all the tears and all that jazz. So, let's see what happens with the tournament. In this pod, though, James, we are going to just give a bit of an overview on the old Euro 2020 fantasy and kind of initial thoughts and stuff, which I've given one. And I quite like the idea of this game.
Why do you like it? This is official game, by the way. Not anything. We're not going to be covering any other versions.
It's relatively simple, but the opportunity. So obviously we need to talk a little bit about some of the rule changes and stuff. There's some good videos already out on the rules and stuff. But from my understanding, and you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, in a match day, if I have a goalkeeper and he plays on day one, and he only scores 2 points, and I have a reserve goalkeeper and he's playing on game 2, I can sub him and I'll get the second goalkeeper's points.
He might get 0 though.
That's the thing. This is why I like it, James. So I see it as a cash out scenario. It's like stay in the bet or cash out. And I think, maybe this is the masochist in me, I think there's going to be a lot of really funny stories of people getting their fingers burnt by making a sub because they're not happy with the points they've scored and getting even less.
Oh, someone's going to take the armband off someone who scored and put it on a player on the final game day who gets sent off.
Yeah, and I like it. So I like the chaos of it. The short format, I think, is particularly good. And so there's only 2 chips, right? So if there's 7 weeks and you've only got 2 chips in the Wildcard and the Limitless, and match week 1, in my opinion, doesn't really count. You're not going to use a chip, are you? Because you've got unlimited transfers. So there's only 6 weeks to use your chips potentially, and the strategy around how you use your chips, especially the Limitless, I think is going to be quite interesting. And then the way you can make your loads of transfers in the quarters, semis, and final allows you to stay engaged and not have a team with only 2 players left by the time you get to the final. So I think that all taken into consideration makes for an interesting game.
There's a little bit of balance in this as well with our experience playing Sky Fantasy the last couple of years. There were elements of this in terms of individual game day captaincy ideas that kind of leans towards a bit of Sky Fantasy. There are many similarities to FPL, but there are obviously some differences. I want to shout out someone I know who's listening. Dragon Sky FF made me think of it. He messaged me last night with a screenshot of his team. Nice team. Wasn't anybody in the team where I thought, you definitely don't want them. Decent selections. But the only response I said is, you need to read the rules.
So there was not enough of a spread across the different groups and match days and all that kind of jazz.
It wasn't a case of that. He had it bust with like Cristiano Ronaldo captain and stuff, which is fine. but don't start like that.
No.
That's the point.
Should we talk about so some of the basic rules are obviously you're limited to the number of players from any individual country. There's the squad structure, same as FPL.
Exactly,
formation,
basically.
same as FPL. In the initial stages, you're only allowed 3 players from one team. That increases as you get closer towards the end, obviously, because I think it gets up to as many as 8 players from one team by the time you get to the final.
You can have 4 from each team, any team in the last 16. Then it increases to 5 for the quarterfinals, 6 for the semi-finals, and then the final 8. So even if you used, I don't see why anyone would, but the Limitless, which is essentially the free hit chip, but with no budget restrictions, you can spend 150 million if you can find a way of doing it. If you did that in the final, you could still only have 8 players from one team.
Yeah.
And actually, if you wanted to fill your bench for whatever reason, you'd have to have 8 of one team and 7 of another team to fill it out.
Yep. And so those things are quite straightforward. There are some changes in the point scoring, but I think the point scoring changes are relatively minor. But the penalties, the way that if you miss a penalty, concede a penalty, the point scoring around penalties is slightly different. And there's an additional point for scoring from outside the box as well.
Correct. So it's 3 changes in terms of scoring, even down to clean sheets. In terms of you need your 60 minutes, it's the same as FPL. The differences are, as Suj just said, you get a point for a goal scored from outside the box. So unfortunately, no James Ward-Prowse is not in the final England squad. You get 2 points for winning a penalty, whether it's converted or not. Minus 1 point if your player concedes a penalty. Otherwise, the physical scoring is basically the same as FPL.
And I don't mind the changes. I think they're fine. I think it helps. That point, cheeky little point for a goal outside the box. I like that. I like it.
I don't think it's going to influence your overall decisions.
No,
just
not
purely
really.
because, let's say a team got to the final. Let's just say England did get to the final. Mason Mount, what's he going to score from outside the box? Maximum of 2. So even through the whole tournament, is someone going to score more than 2 goals outside the box?
Then there was that
It's
plane
minimal.
that flew over the riverside. No long shots, only 2.5% go in, or something like that, wasn't it?
What this, of course, doesn't have is bonus points.
No BPS to worry about.
No BPS bollocks to worry about. None of that sitting there at the end going, why is he on 3 bonus points?
Yeah.
There's no bonus points.
Which is good, actually, in a way.
I agree. I think I'd prefer fantasy without. We talk about it in Sky a lot. Probably prefer not to have man of the matches. I would have no qualms with FPL scrapping bonus points, but they won't. But there isn't in this particular game.
Shorter format. I also think international football generally is slower paced and not as end to end as Premier League football. So I don't know if BPS really matters that much. I mean, you're not going to get as many. The average goals per game in this tournament might not be even as high as the Premier League games, but you do have the disadvantage in the earlier rounds of some mismatches in terms of quality of teams. So that's fairly straightforward. Transfers, James, you're allowed. Is it 2 per match day in the group stages?
It is
3 before the last 16.
No, so before the last 16, you're unlimited,
it's unlimited
again. So the first point I think is really key here when you're picking your team is you do not need to think beyond the group stage. So don't be sitting there thinking, well, I think France are going to win it. I've got to have 3 France players. You don't. You could go without France completely if you want, as they're in the supposed group of death. Although I don't know if we should be naming anything group of death with what's been going on in the last couple of years. But everybody basically gets an enforced wildcard before the last 16. And your budget increases from 100 million to 105 million. So yes, between each group stage match day, so essentially there are, let's call them game weeks. There are 3 game weeks obviously in the group stage. Between game weeks 1 and 2, you can make 2 free transfers. Between 2 and 3, 2 free transfers. Before the quarterfinals, you can make 3 free transfers. This looks the most difficult one to negotiate. Before the semi-finals, you can make 5 free transfers. And before the final, you can make 5 free transfers as well. In terms of rolling transfers, you can. But let's just say, for example, you... all your squad from the last 16 went through to the quarterfinals and you went, don't want to make any changes. So you will only roll 1 transfer. So you'd have 3 free transfers, but if you make no free transfers, Then ahead of the semi-finals where you'd currently have 5, you will only have 6. You won't have 8. So no more than 1 free transfer will roll. You might find that's useful in the group stage if you're not intending to use any chips, i.e. don't make any transfers from 1 to 2. You'll then have 3 before game week 3. But you're wasting a free transfer in there if you do that. So I think you'd still use at least 1 before 2. But I think in most cases, and we'll probably talk about this, most people are going to be using a chip during the group stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you looking forward to the game, man?
As in playing the game?
Yeah.
Yeah, big prize for the winner.
Nothing.
we do it for the glory and for the love.
Yeah.
Nice relaxed vibe to this, I think. Let's do it. Let's enjoy it. I know a lot of people are probably listening to this and not going to play the game. It's absolutely fine. By all means, take a break from fantasy. And we're not going to go too heavy in the fantasy stuff for this day on day. We're going to more talk about the games and solutions and stuff. But yeah, I look forward to playing. I played Champions League this year as well. So the format's quite similar to this.
Yeah, I mean, both UEFA games. So how did you get on into Champions League? Or were you just kind of not really that bothered?
I'd have to check. I think about 1,500 or 2,000 or so.
Okay, a lot of players, I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of serious players, probably only a few thousand. I would have thought.
Okay, yeah, and so any other things that we need to mention in terms of rules?
No, I think we should talk strategy a little bit.
Yeah, this is the one that there was 2 sides to this. When I started getting into it over the weekend and trying to start planning, and I left it a little bit late. There was 2 sides to this. There was the rules and the chips and all that stuff. Let me get my head around that, and then let me start looking at the teams and the players. The rules and the chips and stuff, got my head around relatively quickly. The players, I was like, oh shit, I don't know enough about a lot of these European teams at all. So I've given myself a bit of time to actually go and dig into it. Like, if they ain't playing in the Premier League or one of the big teams in Europe, I don't know about these players. So,
research.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was thinking about it. I don't care enough to do a lot of research.
Selling it as usual.
I'm going to go with some tried and trusted strategies around ownership.
Suj has got Sue check, Sue foul.
Copy paste, yeah. So the players side of stuff, still a little bit of time, and we're going to reveal our drafts and see where we're at on Thursday. So tune back in again if we're going to get into more detail about who we are and aren't picking and why.
We're going to do kind of a definitive watch list on Thursday, and we'll do final drafts on Friday before the big kick-off Friday night. Even that's going to be subject to, it's worth saying your deadline is right up till kick-off of the first game.
Yeah.
So you don't have to panic about picking Italy players before you see the team. I mean, ideally, what I'm kind of thinking with Italy, for example, is at the moment I want a defensive player. I've got the most expensive one sitting in there at the moment, but there's a couple where, if they're suddenly in the team, I'm prepared to drop that down, for example. So you can take that in. The first match day of each game week, you get right up until the first game kicks off. So you can change your team right up until then. So you'll get the benefit of the Italy-Turkey teams on Friday night.
Yep. One thing we didn't talk about was your budget. I mean, it's 100 million. It goes up to 105 past the group stages just because better teams, more expensive players. And the substitutions that you make in the game week. So on the second day of match week 1, say on Saturday, do you have up until the kickoff to make your transfer, or do you have to do it an hour before? So substitution, not transfer.
Same thing, substitution. So best way I can explain, if we just take game week 1 for the moment, so each team's first game in the tournament, it's over 5 days. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Then Wednesday, everybody's second game starts. So on each of the days after Friday, you've got until 2 o'clock UK time to make substitutions should you want to do so. But I don't think many people are going to be doing that on Saturday, Sunday. It's more going to be Monday, Tuesday, because what you should really be doing with your squad is the teams that are playing later in the match week are the guys that should be on your bench. So I already alluded to the example of Cristiano Ronaldo. Leave him on the bench. And that's purely in the mind that you can bring him on for whoever's been your weakest player in your team so far that week. So I've got, at the moment, the way I've got it bust, and this is bound to change by the time Friday comes around, I've got 3 Spain players sitting on the bench who are all due to play on the last day of the match week, I think.
Right. And in any match day, so 5 days, let's say maximum number of substitutions is 4, but that's because you've got 4 players on your bench.
Correct.
So you can't really do any more than that anyway.
You can't keep chopping and changing it. Once you sub a player out, their points are dead, and you don't get them.
Yeah.
So we spoke about one where you said if your keeper scores 2 points, if you sub him out for your sub goalkeeper, you're back to 0. Your sub keeper doesn't score you anything, and then your replacement goalkeeper, whatever he scores, is what you're going to get.
Correct. It's going to be quite an interesting one to manage. I think that's the element of the game that's different from any other, which is why I'm quite looking forward to how people manage.
When you
that.
make substitutions on the screen, there's a tab at the bottom that lets you change between fixture, date. Just pop it to date, and to be honest, who's got the furthest date in the future, put those 3 on the bench.
Yep. I think the interesting thing is as well, I've forgotten what I was going to say there, but it's more around if a player returns and then you sub them, you could find yourself getting burnt.
Yeah, I mean the trick, the interesting thing would be if you're sitting there with Ronaldo on the bench who plays Hungary on the final day of the game week, and all of your players have returned. Who do you bring him in for? Chances are you're not. You're not going to hit 11 players.
You're going to get stuck in a situation where you can't bring him because of a formation. It's going to be like you got a 5-4-1. You want to sub your forward to get Ronaldo.
I mean, yes, there's a possibility that, for example, you could start with a 5-3-2, and you might want to bring your 3 subs on, and you've only had 3 blankers who are defenders. Obviously, you can't do that. You'd have to leave one of them in and sacrifice one of the attacking players who return. So formation-wise, you've got to stay within the same remit of FPL rules. You've got to have at least 3 defenders, at least 2 midfielders, at least 1 attacker. That's exactly the same.
Yep. Have you given any thoughts to your chip strategy? Do you think you'll lock your chip strategy before basically the game starts?
Yes and no. So, as said, you've basically everyone's got a forced wild card before the last 16. And then you've got the limitless chip and another wild card. So that other wild card can be used at any other time. You obviously would not use it before the last 16. Well, in fact, you can't because you've got unlimited transfers anyway. You've got another wild card. And you've got the limitless chip. Now, what the limitless chip allows you is, as I said, there's no budget restrictions. Think of it as a free hit, but there's no budget restrictions. Most people are targeting, and my thinking is exactly the same, as to use it in game week 2.
The limitless.
Yeah.
Yeah, my thoughts were basically pretty similar. Game week 2 is when to play the limitless. Primarily because I think that the weeks that are awkward is game week 3, or match day 3, let's call it, because there'll be a number of teams that will have qualified by then, and so if we worry about rotation and shit shows in terms of who turns up for different countries, game week 3 for me is a bit of a nightmare. There's a flip side to that though. There'll be a number of teams that have to win to qualify, and steaming into them might be particularly interesting as well with a limitless. So I am torn on game week 2 versus 3, but I think I'd prefer the reliability of match day 2 over match day 3.
I think there's certain things I like about using limitless in 2, and I think the biggest plus is France's fixture, which is Hungary. Obviously, you could go into 3 powerful France players. Some people will believe, and we're not saying, that it might be on paper England's most straightforward fixture against Scotland as well. I'm not saying that. Are you saying that?
Who's in our group, mate?
Czech Republic, you dickhead. Czech Republic, Croatia, and Scotland. By the way, this is the best Scotland team they've had for 25 years, and Paul McNulty, I'm sure, is going to tell us that on Wednesday when we talk about Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, but Czech Republic have been doing well, and so have Croatia. So
but you can also go into teams who, Ukraine is a good example, who you might not like what they start with because they start with Holland. But then there's people like Zinchenko, who's listed as a defender, is 5.5, plays in midfield, got North Macedonia in the second game. You think, okay, I'm going to pay for a more expensive defender. When we talk about some pricing and stuff on Thursday,
get Yarmolenko in, mate.
We'll see. I'm sure you're going to end up with like 8 or 9 West Ham players just for the crack.
Yeah, Fabianski in goal, but then I look at Szczesny's bloody might play ahead of him. But Lucas Fabianski's in, Sufal Souček are in.
Republic of Ireland haven't qualified, so you can't go for Darren Randolph, mate.
Yeah, it's a funny one, interesting. But yeah, that game week 2, match week 2, whatever you can call it, looks taste it.
The limitless chip, I think, makes sense to be used in the group stage where you target strong teams who are playing some weaker nations who we may not expect to then be in the knockout stage. You're not going to use a limitless chip. The other good time to use it would be the last 16, but you're on unlimited transfers, so you can't use it then either. Quarterfinals and so on, games are going to be tighter, right? The further you go, the more difficult it is to find points. So I think you should take advantage of it near the start. Therefore, for me, it should be used in match day 2 or match day 3. The other reason to preference 2 over 3 is what you already alluded to, is we might get to the final day and your France's, England's, Belgium's, all these guys might have won their first 2 games, might already be qualified, and then they're playing rotated teams, and therefore the idea of limitless, unlimited budget's dead.
Yep.
Therefore, I think match day 2 is the smart play for the limitless chip, which means leaves us with the wild card, and then I think there are 2 options. If we limitless in match day 2, there are 2 clear options for using the wild card. One is match day 3. So the final game of the group stage, where you might land there and you've got that scenario, like I've said, where you've got a lot of players who you're looking at your squad and you're going, I don't think these guys are going to play. And you can target teams who perhaps need to win, for example. Say Holland have got to that stage and they've only got 4 points, for example. And okay, they're going to pick a strong team. They need to win, to be sure. The other option is to use it for the quarterfinals. And then build yourself. You're then just picking from 8 teams. And you build yourself. I mean, you would go all in heavy on probably 2 or 3 teams as much as possible.
Yeah.
And back them to get through to the end. But you've still got 5 free transfers for the semi, 5 free transfers for the final. So it might be even, I don't know, let's say we had a quarterfinal lineup and there was a couple of unfancy teams got to that stage. You might want to target 4 or 5 players against those 2 teams, for example. So I think the other wild card would be either match day 3 or before the quarterfinal. I don't like the idea of the quarterfinal because you've got 5 free transfers anyway. So I think if you set up properly before the last 16, you're wasting those.
Isn't it 3 between the 16 and the quarterfinals, and then 5 and 5?
You're right, it's free.
I thought it was 3.
It is
That's
free,
why for me it's the jump from the last 16 of 8 teams to 4 teams. 16 teams to 8 teams in the quarterfinals. Losing 8 teams is harder than the 8 to 4 and 4 to 2 teams. So and to manage with 3 transfers. So I feel like that last 16 to the quarterfinals is where I want to use my wild card.
Bit.
Yeah, it's because it's a real reduction, and obviously you want to spread yourself a little bit with the last 16 so that you can make advantage of the substitution kind of feature. And I treat match week 3 as like a blank game week in FPL. Even when we try our best to maneuver it, you still get fucked somehow by someone's rotation. And there's going to be loads. Even if you use your wild card, you could still end up with 8, 9 players, possibly, maybe. So I'm almost disregarding it, and it will be what it will be in terms of match week 3. But that last 16 to quarterfinals reduction from 16 teams to 8 teams, I'm more fearful about. So I reckon I'm going to end up trying to save it for that. Quarters to semis to finals, 5 transfers each. I mean, if you can't maneuver that, then at this point you may as well give up the game because you're going to struggle.
So what I'm trying to do, I haven't decided when I'm going to use that second wild card yet, be it game week 3 or before the quarterfinals. So what I'm trying to do with the squad that I want to pick is I'm picking players for game weeks 1 and 3.
Yep.
Ignoring the second match day,
yep,
where we're going to use the limitless free hit chip, basically. And the decision then is when I land at game week 3, what position is my squad in? If it's in a good position, and bear in mind I'll have 2 free transfers. If it's in a good position, obviously don't use the wild card.
No, you lose your limitless transfers.
Correct.
Yeah.
2 free transfers. Obviously, at that stage, I might even look at it as well and go, well, I might have shit subs for this week, for example. It might be a couple of players who I think, I can't make use of the bench, but my squad's still in a decent position. I'll decide what I'm doing for game week 3, I think, once I get there.
Correct.
Once we know who's qualified, who hasn't, who's likely to pick strong teams, who's likely to change, for example. So this completely depends on how I land when I get there. If I land in a bad position, I'll use the wild card, treat it like a free hit. If I land in a decent position, like yourself, I think, ideally for the quarterfinals, set yourself better. But there's definite positives in using that wild card in match day 3, because essentially you're starting with 3 free hits. If you use the wild card in game week 3, that's basically what you're doing. You've got a free hit in each game week.
Yep.
And you can start powerfully if you do that.
I think this is definitely going to be a game to start well rather than trying to be on catch up.
Well, the format's so short, right? So even to go back to the idea, what you want to do is you've got to start with an Italy or a Turkey player. Whatever you want to do, it's up to you. But start with at least one from those 2 teams and stick the armband on them. Even if they're shit. You never know. There might be a defender who gets you a goal from a set piece or something. Suddenly
Correct.
You're sitting there and it keeps a clean sheet. Suddenly you're sitting there on a 12-pointer or something. Soyuncu, yeah. I mean, probably a bit expensive. But you could start like that. And obviously, if it does nothing, you can use one of your subs to replace that player. And obviously, you can move the captaincy to then someone who's playing on the Saturday. In terms of captaincy, let's say Chiesa's quite popular. We'll speak about players more on Thursday. Chiesa of Italy is quite popular. 7 million. He's going to be quite heavily captained on Friday by the looks of it, as long as he's in the team. Let's say he blanks Friday. Move the captaincy to someone who's playing on a Saturday. Perhaps I think Romelu Lukaku's playing on Saturday, for example. Then you might want to go Harry Kane Sunday. You should leave yourself an option, I think, to have a player that is playing on each game day. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, to give you 5 captaincy possibilities. What I wanted to debate is, what do we do if Chiesa scores Friday night?
That's an entirely individual decision. This is where you get into play it your way. Like, play it your way. There will be people who are aggressive, who will be like, nah, that's not enough. I want a minimum of 10 points from my captain. And if I don't get 10 points or more, double digits, I'm going to keep rolling as part of my plan. And there'll be others that will bank it, cash out, take it, and not risk it moving forward. And this is where I think the game will be won or lost, and we'll learn over time. And that's why we can debate it out, but I think it's going to be very much down to everyone's individual playing style. For me, if I got a 10-pointer of him on Friday night, I'd be done. I'd leave it at that.
I think for the first day, so let's take Chiesa as example, Friday night, I think for me to leave the armband on him, I need 2 returns.
2 returns. So a clean sheet and a goal would be okay.
Well, he is obviously not going to keep clean sheet, so I would want.
That's right.
I would want at least goal and assist at least to keep the armband on him. I think because of it's not a 38 game week season. I think if it was FPL and that we had that situation, we'd go attacking return. I think even if it was an assist, we'd go, oh, at least I haven't blanked. I'd take something. But because the format is so short for this game, I think you gamble. And then perhaps in the last 2 game days, say if your player just scores 1 on Monday, then you might want to stick rather than gamble on moving the armband to someone who's playing on the Tuesday. But I think at the start, you'd want 2 attacking returns for at least the first couple of days. Otherwise, you just keep gambling, I think.
So the decision around that is obviously very individual for people that are playing. But it does kind of beg the question on strategy and rotation and stuff like that. So international tournaments, you'll always find 1 or 2 unfancied players that pop off and end up scoring 4 or 5 goals for the tournament. Maybe it's like a Yilmaz at Turkey or whoever else just suddenly seems to pop up and be the man. That is unexpected. How do we get around? How much of a problem do you think it will be? And how do we get around templateness? And especially as we get closer towards the end of the game, I feel like this game's going to struggle way more with template nature than any other format, and it will be the person that manages to gamble on the right players away from the template that ends up winning. And it really is that. It's a gamble, right? It's like, okay, everyone's going for those 3 Italian defenders. I'm going to take 2 and this other third player for whatever reason. And that player is the one that bangs. So I feel like there's a risk involved here where calculated gambles are the difference between ticking along and doing particularly well.
I think there's obviously going to be quite a template front line. I mean, Harry Kane's ownership at the time recording is 43%, Romelu Lukaku's 42%. That's big. and these guys are going to get captained on.
I'm assuming Ronaldo is particularly high, and Mbappe as well.
Ronaldo 26%, Mbappe 34%. You have to remember the two of them are in quite tough groups. The interesting one for me is Lewandowski, 16% owned.
It's quite low.
And Memphis Depay, 15%. But actually, beyond those 6 forwards, anyone else becomes a little bit of a gamble. And I think you probably want to be picking your forwards from between that pool of 6. And the reason being is, unlike in FPL, where we've got the likes of Salahs and Manes as midfielders, in nearly all the occasions, these guys are forwards in this game. So that's where the bulk of your money's got to be, is the goal scorers. I think defensively, a lot of people are going to go with a lot of 4.5, maybe a couple of 5 or 5.5s, but there's some very good available 4.5 defenders we'll talk about on Thursday. They're going to become quite template. The differential here is probably going to be, can you find the goal scoring midfielders? Is probably what the differential is going to be at the start. And then, of course, people are going to be on different strategies, etc., further down the line where it may break up a little bit. But, of course, once you get to a quarter-final and a semi-final, I mean, if we get to the semi-final, what's Mbappe's ownership going to be? It's probably going to be off the scale, isn't it?
Yes.
And you just cover it and you go with it. So I think it's finding the right goal scorers in the midfield area, because it's not easy, let me tell you. That's probably going to differentiate the people that do well and really well, let's say. I want to give a couple of examples of do's and don'ts with that in mind in terms of how to best use your bench. So there were a couple of players who are priced in the game at 4 million who are proving quite popular in terms of ownership at the moment. There's the Finnish goalkeeper Hradky. I'll tell you his first name. I don't even know. I think he plays for Leverkusen, I want to say. Lucas Hradky. He's 4 million. Now, I'm seeing quite a lot of people. The most popular goalkeeper at the moment is Donnarumma, 5.5. Obviously plays the first night. Reasonable shout to put the armband on him. Although I think for a goalkeeper, you probably need the clean sheet and the penalty save, probably, for it to be worth it.
To make it worthwhile, yeah.
Correct. But obviously, if he's your only player, you can stick the armband on Donnarumma. The problem with that is, let's say Turkey score against Italy Friday night and Donnarumma's got 2 points. Do you actually want to bring the Finland goalkeeper in afterwards? They're playing Denmark.
It's a real 50-50. I'd probably gamble it. If he's only got 2 points, I'd gamble it.
I think you would gamble it.
But it's not like...
But the better way here to start would be, go Hradky, if that's what you want to do. You're not expecting anything from him. But what if he does do well? What if he does keep a clean sheet, couple of save points, etc.? You can leave him in. You're better off pairing him, rather than pairing him with Donnarumma, who's really popular. You're better off pairing him with a goalkeeper who plays on a day after Finland play. So Jordan Pickford, for example, Manuel Neuer, if we can find out whether Tim Krul or Stekelenburg are going to play in goal for Holland, would be absolutely ideal because they're both 4.5. But you're better off starting that way. Start with the shit player. So an alternative to that, there's an extremely popular player who plays for Hungary, John Nagy. He's a 4 million midfielder. His ownership at the moment is about 40%. But Hungary play on the final match day against Portugal. What are what you bringing him off? He's a holding midfield player. What are you bringing him off the bench for? So it's almost a waste. You basically, if you buy that player, you're becoming a 14-man squad. Because obviously, again, if you've got a player in your squad who hasn't returned, you're going to bring him on at the end. But the chance of him returning are extremely small. It's almost a waste. Now, if he was playing against Italy on Friday night, you'd say, okay, great. Stick him in. In the unlikely event that he does well, you leave him in. So there's a difference there. That's why you've got to try and think about what you're doing with your budget players. And you basically want the cheaper players to be playing earlier in the week if you're using them for budget purposes. So in that case, with Hradky, the Finland goalkeeper, you're best off pairing him with a goalkeeper who's playing in groups D, E or F, ideally. So then you can use that to replace him because you're not expecting him to do anything in the first instance.
Right, that makes sense. So cheaper players playing earlier in the week so that if they do return or explode, you can keep them in. Yep. And if they don't, you're bringing in your better players anyway. I think mentally that's probably going to be a lot more easy for people to cope with as well, because subbing out a premium for a cheap player is a head fuck.
Well, if they're blanked, it doesn't really matter what the price was. You just forget about it. But in that case, I think that's the perfect one. Nagy of Hungary, 4 million. What are you bringing him in for? He ain't going to cross the fucking halfway line. So I think budget options from the start. However, perhaps a clearer idea is don't have specific budget players. You can have 4.5 million defenders, and you can easily find 5 good 4.5 million defenders in this game. And you just leave a couple on the bench who are playing later in the week. I think Pau Torres of Spain's going to be very popular. Looks like he's going to be in the team. 4.5 million playing for Spain. It's going to be in most people's teams. But you leave him on the bench to start with, right? And just bring him in for whichever one's blanked later in the week. So be careful with your budget players. I wouldn't take too many risks in the forward areas.
No.
Because most people are going to have a combination of those 6 players that I've mentioned. And they're powerful, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's the place to take gambles. If, for example, Gerard Moreno at Spain's 6.5 million, if it becomes clear that he's in the team, okay, fine. Stick him in the Limitless team in game week 2. Stick him on a wildcard in game week 3. Put him in the unlimited transfers for the last 16, of course. Absolutely. But the risk at the start, I think it's just as easy that Morata plays, for example.
Are you looking to try and make sure you have 15 playing players?
Yeah, I think it's a waste. I think it's a waste if you don't.
Yeah.
Purely because if you pick a squad of 11 players, I mean, how often do you get more than 8 returns?
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
So it's all about balancing the budget rather than explode. You want the big explosive players. They're the ones likely to perform, but you don't want to do it at the cost of decimating your squad is the message here.
What I also want to do for me and my strategy, not knowing if I'm going to wildcard in game week 3 or not, I'm obviously targeting players from teams who have good fixtures
1 and 3
in game week 1 and 3.
Yeah.
And that brings a couple of teams to the table who perhaps might not be on people's radar. So because they've got their toughest fixture in match day 2. So for example, Switzerland, they're not easy fixtures by any means, but start with Wales, play Turkey in 3. You miss the Italy game in 2. Denmark play Finland in 1, Russia in 3. You missed the Belgium game in 2. So there are a few teams like that suddenly come onto the Austria's another one. Macedonia first, Ukraine last. Missed the Holland game. So it's those sort of teams that I'm obviously looking to target players within, and we'll speak about more of them on Thursday.
There we go. Anything else we need to let the listeners know in the next couple of days?
100% biggest advice I give, please read the rules. If anybody's unsure, DM me.
Yeah,
no problems.
That's a good shout. And of course, there is other content creators creating bits and pieces, so you can scout around. If you don't want to DM James, James is obviously super busy researching.
No, I'm good at them. To be honest,
midfield
till Friday, I'm good.
Free kick takers.
Then I'm busy.
Watching the games. I hope this little rundown of our initial thoughts on Euro 2020 fantasy has been a help, listeners, and gets you going with putting your squad together. Deadline's Friday, so we are now into the final week. And on Thursday, as James mentioned, we will be looking at watch lists. Friday will be squad reveals. Tomorrow, we have a look at Wales with FPL Corf. And on Wednesday, we have a look at Scotland with Paul McNulty.
To be honest, he's going to be offended by that accent. We're not going to look at the two teams
Scottish
too heavily.
Fucking good.
We're not going to look at them too heavily from a fantasy perspective. We more just want to get an idea in terms of what's changed with Wales since obviously they reached the semi-finals. Did fantastic 5 years ago. I'm going to speak to Ross Corf FPL about what's happening with Ryan Giggs. Technically, he's still the manager, but he's not going to be at the tournament. Paul's promised us some Scotland touring stories on Wednesday, so
nice.
It'll be a chilled out laugh. Thursday, we'll really get into, because to be honest, I think a watch list is probably only about 30 players to start with, depending on strategy, etc.
Bring pen and paper for that one.
So we'll do that on Thursday, and then Friday, I think we'll go through our final selections, and then when we do it, I'll say, no, Suj, please change that. And
nah, I'm going Maverick with this tournament because it's just short format. There's nothing riding on it.
What he does, don't do what he does.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna just not like crazy Maverick, but at least 25%, because I don't think you can win the game if you don't a little bit.
You're going to try and win it, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, what's the point otherwise? I think I'll either win it or be last, one or the other. Let's go.
I think you could end up winning this by being very template, by the way.
Interesting. We'll talk more about that later in the week. thank you for tuning in. If wherever you're listening to the podcast, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do hit the notification bell or the like button or subscribe or whatever else it may be. If you want more content from us, then you can head over to patreon.com/.
We're doing more content.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to see my pin tweet on Twitter.
Exactly. If you head over to Twitter to Planet FPL Pod, James put a great thread out yesterday that just explains all of the stuff that's coming at you this summer, which is a lot. When I was reading it and I just started laughing to myself, and my wife was sitting, she's like, "Why are you laughing to yourself?"
Because I ain't seen you for a month or two.
You wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand, because I can't even start to explain to all the stuff that's coming. So do head over and check that out. Content Creator Week, Correspondence Week, EFL Week, Takeover Week. There's so much stuff this summer. And it's all different. It's all got its own twist. So I'm really, really looking forward to actually a lot of it. And you can find out more there. Other than that, happy birthday to my missus' birthday today.
All right, birthday, sweetheart.
Yeah, nice one. Happy birthday.
I wish I've already seen her this morning. That didn't come out well. I wish you'd explained that to me so I could have said, "Hey, mate, happy birthday." It's all
good, mate. When you get to our age, you stop celebrating them.
So true.
But you never know. She might. For the first time in her life.
Is that why we got hot dogs and chips this afternoon?
Nah, it's just because we've got a few people back in the office for a nice change. Stay safe. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man, child.
Everyone's thinking you guys don't need more hot dogs, mate.
No, I definitely don't.